Ladies and gentlemen, some of you have been praying for something so long, you've started to wonder if heaven even has your number anymore. You've cried, you've fasted, you've written it down, you've whispered it in the middle of the night, and still nothing looks different. You're sitting here thinking, what's the point if nothing's changing? Let me tell you something. Prayer is not magic, it's movement. It moves things in the unseen before you ever see them in the seen. And sometimes the first thing it moves is you. I remember a season where I was praying for a door to open every day, every night, and all I kept hearing from God was silence. But what I didn't realize was that while I was waiting for him to change my situation, he was changing my spirit. I wanted relief, but he was giving me resilience. I wanted answers, but he was giving me alignment. See, some of us treat prayer like it's ordering food at a drive-thru. Place your request, expect it hot and fast. But prayer is not a transaction, it's a transformation. Prayer is not a last resort, it's your first weapon. Too often we treat prayer like it's an emergency exit, something we only run to when everything else has failed. We try our own plans, lean on our own wisdom, exhaust every human option, and then finally say, well, I guess all we can do now is pray. That mindset flips the power of prayer upside down. Prayer was never meant to be the last thing you try, it was designed to be the first weapon you draw. When you start with prayer, you start from a place of spiritual authority. You're declaring that before you talk to people, before you Google solutions, before you scroll social media for advice, you're going straight to the one who sees the whole picture. God is not surprised by your situation. He has already been in your tomorrow, arranging things for your good. Prayer invites his perfect strategy into your imperfect situation. Think about soldiers on a battlefield. They don't wait until they're wounded and surrounded to pick up their weapons. They go into the fight ready, armed and alert. That's what prayer does. It arms your mind and heart before the enemy even makes his move. It's a preemptive strike against fear, anxiety, and doubt. The enemy's greatest hope is that you will forget how powerful prayer actually is. He wants you to think of it as a religious formality or a mental exercise. But prayer is not just a feel-good moment. It's a spiritual transaction. When you pray, you are authorizing heaven to invade earth in your life. You are shifting atmospheres, opening doors, breaking chains, and releasing peace into chaos. Some of us only see prayer as a way to get things from God. But in reality, prayer is the way to stand in God. It's how you take your position as his child, knowing he has both the authority and the desire to act on your behalf. When you realize that, you stop praying weak, hesitant prayers, and you start praying bold, confident ones. Here's the danger of treating prayer as a last resort. By the time you finally turn to it, you've already been drained by fear, stress, and frustration. You've already told yourself 100 reasons why it won't work. But when you make it your first move, you get to start with faith instead of doubt. You approach your situation with the mindset that God is already at work, not that he might show up if you're lucky. When life blindsides you, a sudden phone call, an unexpected bill, a devastating diagnosis, you don't have to panic first and pray later. You can flip the script and pray first, then respond from a place of peace. That doesn't mean you won't feel the weight of the situation, but it does mean you won't face it unarmed. Making prayer your first weapon also changes your posture in the battle. You begin to see challenges not as hopeless dead ends, but as opportunities for God to show his power. You start expecting him to move, and expectation is the soil where miracles grow. This is why you can't afford to wait until you're desperate to pray. You've got to build a lifestyle of prayer now in the small battles, so that when the big ones come, your reflex is already set. You won't have to wonder what to do. You'll already know. So today, shift your thinking. Stop saying, all we can do is pray, like it's a weak fallback plan. Start saying, the first thing I'm going to do is pray, because you know it's the strongest thing you can do. Your first weapon is not worry, not panic, not strategy, it's prayer. And when you lead with prayer, you lead with power. Faith in prayer means believing before you see the evidence. Real faith doesn't wait for confirmation, it acts on conviction. When you pray with faith, you're declaring, I trust God's promise more than I trust my present reality. That's not always easy because everything in your human nature wants proof. You want to see the answer forming before you believe it's coming. But God's kingdom works differently. You believe first. Then you see. It's like planting a seed. When you drop that seed in the soil, you don't see anything changing for days, maybe even weeks. The dirt still looks the same. The surface still looks barren. But under that soil, something is happening. Roots are growing. Foundations are forming. The life is there, but it's invisible for now. Faith in prayer is the same way you trust that what you prayed for is already moving towards you, even when your circumstances don't show it yet. The Bible says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That means your faith is the receipt for something you haven't held yet. If you order a package online, you don't panic the next day because it hasn't arrived yet. You trust it's on the way because you have confirmation. Prayer works the same way. When you pray in faith, you already hold the spiritual receipt for the thing you're asking for. This is why faith-filled prayer is so different from wishful thinking. Wishing says, I hope this happens, but I'm not sure. Faith says, it's already settled in heaven, and I'm just waiting for it to show up on earth. That kind of belief changes how you speak, how you act, and how you wait. You start walking like someone who knows their blessing is coming. You make room for it. You prepare for it. But here's the challenge. Life will throw you evidence that contradicts your prayer. You'll hear no when you wanted yes. You'll face delays that make you question God's timeline. You'll encounter situations that look like the exact opposite of what you prayed for. This is where faith in prayer gets tested. Because if you only believe when it's easy, you're not operating in faith. You're operating in comfort. Faith that believes before seeing is raw and courageous. It chooses to say, God, I trust you even if nothing looks like it's working. It's the faith of Noah building an ark while the skies are still clear. It's the faith of Abraham walking up a mountain with his only son, believing God will provide. It's the faith of Hannah praying for a child while years of barrenness try to convince her otherwise. Believing before you see also means praying with gratitude ahead of time. Gratitude is the language of faith. When you start thanking God before the answer comes, you're showing him that you believe his word is as good as done. You're saying, I don't have to wait for the evidence to worship you. I can praise you in advance. And here's what happens. That kind of belief doesn't just change your prayer life. It changes you. You stop living on an emotional roller coaster where your hope rises and falls with your circumstances. Instead, your confidence is anchored in God's character, which never changes. So the next time you pray, don't just ask, believe. Believe before the door opens. Believe before the healing is visible. Believe before the reconciliation happens. Hold on to your prayer like you're holding the package tracking number, knowing it's on the truck, on the way and on time. When you have faith in prayer, you live like the answer is already written into your story. You stop doubting whether it will happen and start asking, God, how do you want me to prepare for it? That's when the unseen starts to become seen. That's when faith becomes reality. Delay does not mean denial. One of the hardest things about prayer is waiting. We live in a world that values speed, fast food, instant messages, same-day delivery. So when we pray and nothing happens immediately, we're tempted to think that God either didn't hear us or he's not going to answer. But delay in the kingdom is not the same as denial. Just because something is taking longer than you expected doesn't mean God has closed the door. Waiting is not wasted time. It's preparation time. Sometimes God has to prepare the situation for you, and other times he has to prepare you for the situation. If you got everything you prayed for the moment you prayed it, you might not have the maturity, wisdom, or faith to handle it. The delay is God's way of building your capacity so the blessing won't crush you when it arrives. Think about Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a dream at 17 that he would be a ruler, but it took over 13 years of betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and prison before the dream became reality. If Joseph had taken the delay as denial, he would have given up before he ever saw the palace. But every delay was actually God positioning him, training him, and shaping him into the man who could handle the weight of leadership. The enemy loves to use delays to plant doubt. He whispers, if God was going to do it, he would have done it by now. Maybe he forgot. Maybe you're not worthy. Maybe he changed his mind. But the truth is, if God promised it, he's faithful to fulfill it, just not always on your timeline. His timing is perfect because he sees the whole picture, not just the part you're living in right now. Sometimes the delay is also a test of trust. Will you still believe when you can't see? Will you still worship when the answer hasn't arrived? Will you still pray when the waiting feels endless? This is where your faith gets strengthened. Faith that can endure the waiting is faith that can carry the weight of the blessing. I remember a season where I prayed for a breakthrough and thought it would happen in a few weeks. Weeks turned into months, months into over a year. At first, I was frustrated. But in that waiting, God taught me things about his character I wouldn't have learned any other way. I discovered that he's not just the God of the destination. He's the God of the journey. And when the breakthrough finally came, I realized the wait had built a deeper trust in me than the answer ever could. Delays also have a way of filtering our desires. When you have to wait for something, you find out if you really want it or if it was just a momentary wish. God uses waiting to refine your motives so that when he blesses you, it aligns with his will and not just your convenience. So if you're in a waiting season right now, take heart. Don't let the enemy convince you that the delay means never. God is not ignoring you. He's preparing something better than what you think you need. While you're waiting, work on becoming the person who can carry the blessing with integrity. Strengthen your prayer life. Build your faith muscles, because one day the door will open. The thing you prayed for will arrive. And when it does, you'll look back on the waiting and see it for what it really was, not wasted time, but sacred preparation. Delay is not denial, it's divine timing. Your pain can become your pulpit. Pain is one of life's greatest teachers. It's not a class anyone signs up for willingly, but it's one that shapes us more deeply than comfort ever could. When you've walked through loss, heartbreak, disappointment, or failure, you carry a weight that, if surrendered to God, can be transformed into wisdom, empathy, and authority. That's why your pain can become your pulpit. When I say pulpit, I'm not just talking about a stage in a church with a microphone. Your pulpit is any place where you can speak into someone's life. Your living room, your workplace, your friendships, even a social media post. And nothing speaks more powerfully than a testimony born out of real struggle. People connect to your scars more than your trophies because your scars prove you've survived something that once tried to destroy you. We often think that ministry starts when we've arrived, when everything is neat, tidy, and figured out. But some of the most impactful ministry happens while you're still healing. Your vulnerability becomes a bridge for others to find hope. When you tell someone, I've been there, it's not theory, it's truth stamped into your soul by experience. Think about Paul in the Bible. He went through imprisonments, shipwrecks, betrayals, physical suffering, and yet he wrote letters that still encourage believers today. His pain became the platform from which he spoke about God's faithfulness. The credibility of his words was rooted in the credibility of his wounds. The enemy wants you to believe that your pain disqualifies you, that the mistakes you've made or the seasons you've endured make you too broken to be used by God. But here's the truth. God doesn't waste pain. What the enemy meant for evil, God can repurpose for good. Your testimony could be the exact lifeline someone else is praying for right now. Here's the shift that happens when you let your pain become your pulpit. You stop hiding your story out of shame and you start sharing it out of purpose. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, who can I help with what I've been through? Pain gives you a voice that's not just heard, but felt. I remember a time when I was in the middle of a season so heavy, I thought I'd never see light again. I prayed for relief, but the relief didn't come right away. What did come was an opportunity to speak into someone else's life who was facing a similar storm. I didn't give them a polished sermon. I gave them the raw truth of what I was walking through and how God was sustaining me. That conversation changed both of us because in sharing my pain, I found purpose. There's a power in telling your story that goes beyond sympathy. It's about pointing people toward the same God who carried you. It's saying, he did it for me. He can do it for you. That's why Revelation 12:11 says, they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Your testimony is a weapon. So don't bury your pain as if it's useless. Lift it up, let God redeem it, and then use it to encourage others. Someone out there is walking through the exact valley you've already survived. You may be the proof they need that it's possible to make it through. When you choose to see your pain as a pulpit, your wounds no longer define you. They refine you. They don't silence you. They amplify your voice. And the message they carry is clear. God is faithful even here. Authentic prayer is raw, not rehearsed. We live in a world where so much of what we do is filtered, edited, and polished before anyone else sees it. Social media teaches us to present the highlight reel while hiding the messy, unfiltered moments. Unfortunately, that same mindset can creep into our relationship with God. We think we have to come to Him with perfect words, a calm tone, and church-approved language. But authentic prayer is not about performance. It's about honesty. God is not impressed by rehearsed speeches. He's moved by real hearts. When you read the Psalms, you see raw prayer in action. David didn't hold back with God. Some days he was praising and singing about God's greatness. Other days he was angry, confused, and asking, Lord, where are you? That's not disrespect. That's relationship. A real relationship has room for joy, frustration, hope, and even questions. God already knows what's in your heart, so pretending with Him is pointless. Raw prayer sounds like this: God, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I feel like you've gone quiet and I need you. Or, God, I'm grateful, but I'm also hurting. Help me hold both at the same time. These are the kind of prayers that open the door for genuine connection because you're bringing God the truth of where you are, not where you wish you were. The danger of rehearsed prayer is that it can keep you from being vulnerable. You end up focusing more on saying the right thing than on actually being real. And when you aren't real, you're not giving God the full picture of your heart. Yes, he already knows. But there's something powerful about confessing it out loud. There's a release that comes when you stop trying to polish your pain before you present it to him. Jesus himself modeled authenticity in prayer. In the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing the cross was ahead, he prayed, "Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." That prayer wasn't scripted. It was raw surrender. It showed the tension between human desire and divine purpose. And it reminds us that God can handle our weakness, our tears, and even our resistance as long as we bring it to him. Authentic prayer is also consistent. When you know you don't have to put on. For God, you talk to him more often. You stop waiting for the perfect setting or mood. You pray while driving to work, while washing dishes, while walking the dog. It becomes a conversation, not a ceremony. That constant, open communication is what builds intimacy with him. I remember a season where I felt completely worn out. My prayers weren't poetic. They were short and messy. God, I'm tired. I need you. And you know what? Those prayers still reached heaven because prayer isn't graded on eloquence. It's measured by sincerity. God would rather hear 5 seconds of real honesty than 5 minutes of empty words. Authentic prayer also creates space for listening. When you're not busy performing, you can be still enough to hear what God is speaking back. And often, his answers come in ways that bring peace, clarity, or strength you didn't have before you prayed. So drop the script. Stop worrying about whether your prayer sounds good enough. God isn't looking for a perfect recital. He's looking for a real relationship. Pray like you talk to a trusted friend because that's who he is. Bring him the laughter, the tears, the confusion, and the hope. When you dare to be raw with God, you'll discover he meets you exactly where you are. And in that meeting place, your faith deepens, your trust grows, and your relationship with him becomes unshakable. Authentic prayer is not rehearsed, it's real, and that's where the power is. When you trust your prayers, you trust God's character. Prayer is more than just talking, it's an act of trust. When you pray, you're not only believing for an answer, you're making a statement about who you believe God is. If you trust your prayers, it's because you trust his nature, his goodness, his wisdom, his timing, and his faithfulness. But if you doubt your prayers, deep down you might be wrestling with whether you truly believe God will keep his word. Trusting your prayers starts with knowing who you're praying to. If you believe God is distant, harsh, or uninterested in your life, your prayers will feel empty. But when you know he's a loving father who sees every detail, hears every cry, and cares about every burden, you pray with confidence. Your faith isn't based on the size of your request. It's based on the size of your God. The truth is, God's character doesn't change with your circumstances. Even when life feels unfair, his heart for you remains the same. He doesn't get weaker when the odds are against you. He doesn't grow tired of hearing you ask. He doesn't forget what he promised. That's why trusting your prayers is really about anchoring your hope in who he is, not just in what you want him to do. When you know God's character, you understand that every yes, every no, and every not yet is filtered through his love. Sometimes his no is not rejection, it's protection. Sometimes his not yet is not neglect, it's preparation. And sometimes his yes doesn't look like what you imagined, but it's exactly what you need. I remember praying for something I thought would be the breakthrough I needed. I believed, I fasted, I prayed every single day for months. But the answer I got was the opposite of what I asked for. At first, I was devastated. I wondered if I had prayed wrong or if God was disappointed in me. But looking back, I can see clearly it wasn't that God ignored my prayer, it's that he saw the bigger picture. If he had given me what I wanted in that moment, it would have set me back instead of moving me forward. His no was actually a setup for a better yes down the road. Trusting God's word means surrendering the outcome. It's saying, Lord, I believe you're good. So even if this doesn't happen the way I hoped, I still trust you. That's not easy because surrender is an act of faith that says, I'd rather have your will than my own. It means valuing his presence more than his presence. It also means you don't measure God's faithfulness by how quickly he answers. If your trust is tied to speed, your faith will crumble in seasons of waiting. But when your trust is tied to his unchanging nature, you can stand firm even when it's taking longer than expected. Trusting your prayers is really about living like they're already in God's hands. It's resisting the urge to keep taking them back to control the outcome yourself. It's believing that the same God who heard you the first time hasn't stopped working behind the scenes. The enemy wants you to focus on what you see so you forget who you know. But if you keep your eyes on God's character, Your confidence won't rise and fall with your circumstances. You'll know that your prayers are not wasted words. They're seeds planted in the soil of his promises. When you trust your prayers, you're saying, God, I believe you're good, you're faithful, and you're for me. And when that belief becomes your foundation, no matter what the answer looks like, you can stand secure knowing the one who holds your prayers also holds your future. Persistence in prayer grows persistence in life. Prayer isn't just about getting answers, it's about developing endurance. When you learn to stay consistent in prayer, even when you don't see results right away, you're building spiritual muscles that carry over into every other part of your life. Persistence in prayer teaches you to keep going when things get hard, to push through when obstacles appear, and to believe for more even when the odds are stacked against you. In our instant gratification culture, persistence feels foreign. We want to pray once and see it happen overnight. But God often uses the process of continual prayer to develop something far deeper in us than the answer we're asking for. Every time you go back to him, every time you pour your heart out again, every time you choose faith over frustration, you're strengthening your ability to stand firm. Jesus told a parable in Luke 18 about a widow who kept coming to a judge, asking for justice. The judge didn't respond right away, but she didn't stop asking. Eventually, because of her persistence, he granted her request. Jesus used that story to remind us that if persistence works, even with an unjust judge, how much more will it work with a loving God? The point wasn't that we have to wear God down until he gives in. It was that persistence shapes us into people who refuse to give up. Persistence in prayer is also an act of resistance against the enemy. The enemy wants to convince you that because the answer hasn't come yet, it's not coming at all. He wants you to get tired, discouraged, and distracted so you stop praying. But every time you keep showing up in prayer, you're proving that your faith is stronger than his lies. You're declaring, I believe God's promises more than I believe my problems. This consistency spills over into life outside of prayer. When you've learned to stay faithful in the secret place, you naturally stay faithful in your relationships, your work, your calling, and your personal growth. You stop being someone who quits when it's uncomfortable, and you become someone who endures until the fruit shows. Persistence in prayer also teaches patience. And patience isn't passive, it's active trust. It's staying in position, doing what you can while believing God to do what you can't. That same mindset helps you approach challenges in life with steadiness instead of panic. You know that breakthroughs rarely happen instantly. They're often the result of consistent effort, just like prayer. I remember a time when I prayed for something every single day for over 2 years before I saw even a hint of change. There were days I felt like my words were bouncing off the ceiling. But in that process, my faith grew. My ability to trust God without visible proof deepened. And when the answer finally came, it wasn't just a victory in the situation. It was a victory in my spirit because I had learned how to stand without quitting. Sometimes persistence in prayer doesn't change the situation right away, but it changes you right away. It teaches you to keep showing up, to keep believing, to keep holding on. It's training for every other battle you'll face in life. So don't underestimate the value of persistence. The same discipline that keeps you on your knees will keep you moving forward when the road gets hard. And when the answer comes, because it will, you'll realize that the persistence you built in prayer was the very thing that carried you through the waiting. Persistence in prayer is persistence in life. If you can keep believing in the unseen, you can keep fighting in the seen. And that's the kind of endurance that wins battles, both in the spirit and in the world.